Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our Woody Allen Retrospective right here on planettyro.com. I'm your host, Donald Wonder, and I'm joined once again by my co-host of this venture, Simon Rad.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you guys survived this movie.
Oh, come on, Simon. It can't be that bad, or is it? Well, stay tuned.
I know it sounds a little bit doom and gloom, but oh my God, let's just get into it, man. I want to get this over with.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm not going to bother leave anyone suspect. This movie, for the record, is one of the ones in the whole Woody Allen collection retrospective. It's the more frowned upon, not so loved. But again, because we're doing everything, whether we love it or we hate it or whatever, we're going to have a discussion. And on that note, guys, on our last video, we actually covered the non-directed but definitely Woody Allen movie, Play It Again, Sam, which me and Sam had a really good conversation on. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a card I'll put up in the top right corner to go back to that discussion. But for all you guys listening on the podcast that are not watching on YouTube, there's going to be a link in the description to get all the past, previous, all the videos. It's a complete playlist, guys, so check it out. We're going to be doing this all year and beyond. And what we would like to do, guys, we always give this warning. We would prefer you watch the movie we're talking about beforehand to get that first-hand experience, unless you don't care about spoilers. If you don't care about spoilers, you're in the right place. Stay tuned. We're going to dig into this one. And I guess I forgot to say, guys, we're on Stitcher Radio. We're on your iTunes, all the podcast apps you can need. We're everywhere. So as well as the YouTube guys, we love you podcast guys. And actually, at the end of this podcast, we're going to talk about some of the feedback we've been getting. Because although this is a place where me and Simon talk about these movies, I want to talk about some of the criticism or some of the feedback we've got from you. Some good, some bad. And we might go on a little tangent about that. But let's put all that aside. Let's get to the point. So Simon, if you don't mind, give us the year and the title of this movie, and let's get right into it.
Okay, so this is the notorious Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex, but We're Afraid to Ask, from 1972, the same year Play It Again, Sam came out. A movie directed and written by Woody Allen, also starring him and a number of other actors, including legends such as Gene Wilder or Burt Reynolds, and really just a huge cast of people. It's an ensemble film and a collection of sketches. You know how we talked about that in some of his earlier films, the first two, he experimented cutaways and random jokes and random sketches.
Yeah, Take
and
the
then
Money
Played
and
Against
Run
Sam,
Bananas.
which was and then Played Against Sam, which wasn't directed by him, shied away from that a little bit. Yeah. They had cutaways, they had some elaborate jokes, but mostly it was a straightforward narrative and a more subtle approach to a Woody Allen story. Well, here he really expressed going in the exact opposite direction and just cut the story out altogether. I just went for a bunch of sketches back to back.
Yeah, full sketch mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, for those of you who like to listen to the podcast before you watch the movie and are thinking, okay, I know why what the movie's problem is going to be, that it hasn't really aged well because the taboo's not there, right? Like the whole joke is the taboo of we're going to talk about sex. It's 1972 and it's going to shock people. But with today's viewers, it's just not going to be there. You know, we talk about sex more casually.
Yeah.
The movie has nothing on what, 6-year-olds have in their favorites list on their fucking iPads these days.
That's what I was going to say. So yes, Simon, that's exactly what I was going to actually bring up. But yeah, go ahead.
But it's actually not that, because the movie's not so much about sex, but really goofy, weird ideas that don't amount to really anything.
Well, actually, before you get started, let me interject a little bit, because the movie, guys, if you don't know this, the movie title, as you said, Everything You Always Know About Sex, We're Afraid to Ask. There was a book released a few years before that was done by a physician called David Rubin. The book was released in 1969.
Oh, yeah. I know this story. I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
And at the time, I'll talk a little about the book as well. And at the time, sex education at, the late 60s, you could say it was the end of the hippie time, I guess. But still, when it came to sex education, domestically, it was very frowned upon. And if you're talking about from an educational standpoint in schools and stuff, it was kind of, like you said, tabooish and stuff like that. So this book was a big seller. I think it sold like 51 million. It was massive. And ironically, the guy who wrote the book, the reason why, because some people might think, oh, this Woody Allen movie is an adaptation of the book.
No.
And I'm sure you already know this, Simon, because you looked this up. But basically, it's rumored that basically the guy who wrote the book, David Rubin, he was doing an interview on one of these late night TV shows about the book, and he used one of Woody Allen's jokes. I think it was from either Take the Money and Run or Bananas. It
was Take the Money and Run. It was the line. I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe it's, does sex have to be dirty? And yes, if you're doing it right, or something along those lines.
Yeah, if it's not dirty, you're not doing it right, something like that. And I think Woody Allen heard the interview and thought, oh, he's taking my jokes, so I'm going to take his movie and
his book title,
and I'm going to parody it. And the funny thing is about this movie, the movie's broke up into these segments that are taken from chapters of the actual book as well. But as you said, it's not even like he's doing actual commentary, because these are spoofs. I don't think he's actually trying to be intelligible at all. And actually, guys, we're going to get into every single segment separately. But before we do that, I just want to say, one of my favorite shows of all time, The Wonder Years, the classic late 1960s TV drama. They had an episode about the book, everything you always wanted to know about sex. I'll try to put the clip on our YouTube channel if you can see it. And basically, it's so funny because it's the second episode of the whole series. Actually, the second episode, which is called Swingers. Actually, Kevin, the main character in The Wonder Years, and his brother are fighting over the book, and his mum comes in. And his mum's like, Kevin, where'd you get this book from? And he's like, oh, mum. And long story short, the big joke is that she says, you should never go through my stuff, when Kevin actually stole the book. And then Kevin's like, well, I guess she was surprised when she found out that, they never brought up again. So I just found it I'm bringing this up for pop culture relevance. Basically, the book was a big deal. They even brought up in The Wonder Years. So I actually thought it would have made more sense if they brought up the movie in The Wonder Years, but then again, I don't know. But anyway, that's how when I watched The Wonder Years again and I remember that book, I thought, oh yeah, Woody Allen made the movie of this. But I know, guys, I'm just bringing out some random trivia, especially from my own experience. But you know what, Simon? Let's go into this segment by segment.
Yeah, I know. Let's dig into this. Like, to be objective, right? The only thing I can say is that we talked about the early years of Woody Allen's film appearances, how those movies were kind of weird and zany in the 60s. And now we're in the 70s with a bunch of revolutions going on, the hippie age, sexual revolution, breaking down all these taboos and all these experimental movies. There's a bit of that here. For you guys to understand, this is all before Star Wars. Star Wars came out in 77. That's what really prepared people's mindset for innovation in film going towards special effects. That's not to say there weren't special effects driven movies. I mean, like I'd say 2001 Space Odyssey came out in 68, I believe, So there definitely were examples of that. But for the time being, around 72, being innovative, experimental in film still meant tackling different subject matters in different ways.
Sure.
Different perspectives, breaking the fourth wall, trying to assemble a movie, put together a movie like it hasn't been done before, doing back to front, sporadically, different stories combined into one movie, different narrative structures. So people were experimenting with that, and this was Woody Allen's take on it, but it kind of just ends up being a spoof film, which you immediately see from the first sketch that is basically a take on Hamlet.
Yeah, the first sketch is called Do Aphrodisiac's Work, and it's Woody Allen being a court jester, and he's trying to have sex with the queen, and he gets this love potion, and it's just silly. And again, we're gonna just briefly go through this, guys, very briefly.
Yeah,
I found it. I don't know. The whole thing is Woody Allen tells these jokes nobody gets and pretty bad, and then him and the Queen just have this little tumble. It's just whatever. I didn't really find it funny. I was just like, whatever. I didn't care for it. I was just like, whatever. I didn't hate it, but I just thought the costume design was nice, but that's pretty much all I got from it, really.
That's why I keep hearing. You can actually tell which segments were shot at which part of the production, because they're not consistent in quality. Like the first segment, the Hamlet spoof, is basically shot the best. So you can see that Woody Allen's actually getting better at being a director as he goes along with this film.
That's true.
But the title sets you up for something you think it's a little bit more clever. Essentially, the joke is that they speak in sort of a riff on Shakespearean tongue, but use a lot of sex terms or metaphors alluding to sex, and also a lot of modern explanations. So they don't just talk about the castle; they talk about the mortgage that comes with it. But it's cute at places, and it tries to do its best. Woody Allen even turns to the camera and actually breaks the fourth wall. So if you're counting for his memorable moments of innovation, there's one for you. It wasn't Annie Hall, it was this one. But honestly, it's just not that funny. That's the thing.
Yeah,
when you get away from the title of the book, you go through the main bits of the opening of Hamlet, where Woody Allen sees the ghost of his dad, who tells him to bang the Queen effectively, and that's about it. And to be honest with you, this one and the following up sketch, the other reason I didn't really like it, because it kind of rubs you the wrong way. I mean, effectively, he gets drugs to drug the Queen and have sex with her against her will. I mean, I know I'm going into deep, but technically this is kind of this segment is a little bit about date rape, more or less, if you think about it.
Hey, love potions. You cross the line, Simon. Love potions. If this was a woman doing that, you wouldn't be saying that. Let's not get into those double standards now, son.
I don't know, man. I think love potion is a metaphor for something that knocks you out.
Yeah, I know.
But that's just me. I just felt like...
No, you're right. And to be honest with you, the only thing I'll say in this defense, love potions in those kind of times, medieval, those Victorian times, is something that's a tried trope in that kind of story. So it's not something, if you've seen a lot of those
medieval adventures,
whatever, the love potion element is always just used so many times.
I know. What was that, Tristan and Isolde?
Yeah, well done. There you go. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know. Classic tales. I guess the joke is that it plays with audiences' expectations. You see, do aphrodisiacs work? And then we open up in like the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, let's move on to the next segment, because that's even worse in my eyes.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. Simon's saying the next segment's worse, and for a lot of people, this is the best segment, and that's segment number 2, which is called What is Sodomy, with the now deceased Gene Wilder, a beloved actor, a beloved comedian, so a classic library. But let's just judge him on this particular segment, where Gene
the
Wilder,
original Willy Wonka, Willy Wonka. Although it seems like Johnny Depp borrowed more from his performance in this movie for his portrayal than the actual Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
I guess you're bringing the creep factor in when you say that.
Oh yeah.
But Gene Wilder is a psychiatrist specifically?
No. So this one, Gene Wilder is introduced to us as your average everyday doctor. He handles a bunch of patients. He's happily married. But then one of the Kardashians, or at least a relative of them from Armenia, shows up with...
That's terrible.
He doesn't really specific... Well, this explains a lot, to be honest with you. This movie, if you ever wondered about the Kardashians' relationship, this particular segment gives you the explanation. But basically, this Armenian gentleman is a goat farmer. And even though he doesn't name any particular disease, he quickly confesses that he's romantically involved with the goat, and that his particular problem is...
A sheep, actually. It's a sheep. Get your animals right, Simon. If you're going to sodomize an animal, get them right.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I apologize. Thank you for reminding me. So yes, with a sheep. And his problem is the sheep doesn't love him back anymore. the sheep went cold. It's just the emotions aren't there yet.
Yeah.
And you're saying like this sounds like a terrible 5-minute short film, but wait, it gets better, because when the sheep comes into play, you guessed it, Gene Wilder, at least his character, also develops emotions towards the sheep. And if you replace the innocent little sheep with innocent little girl, you quickly realize that this whole fucking segment...
Why did you take it there?
Because it is a metaphor for being together with an underage girl the entire...
No, you're coming to that conclusion all on your own. That is... It's an animal. It's not a fucking child. That is really crossing the line. I'm sorry. And they're both... Don't get me wrong. They're both deplorable. I don't condone fucking animals or anything like that, but I don't see where you're getting that connection from. That is really wrong.
Because the rest of the movie is, again, a spoof on Lifetime dramas. That basically he begins with an affair. He's happier than ever. He finds something in the sheep that's so young and innocent. And then he gets exposed. I don't know about young. Innocent, yes, I don't know the young part, but well, it's this fair little sheep. Well, what is a fair little sheep a metaphor for?
Okay.
And of course, everybody's outraged, and his wife. I don't want to spoil the entire segment, but he goes through the motions of any guy who got caught with an underage girl, basically. That's the whole plot of this segment.
I think there's a big difference between being caught by underage and a sheep. He would be dead. Like, just society won't just frown upon you, about a paedophile. People would kill you. I mean, if it's an animal, you'll be frowned upon. So I don't know why you're making me defend this fucking segment. I hate you for that. Right now.
That's how I felt. The whole segment. That's just what it reminded me of.
All right. Look, I've let you shit on this a little bit. Let me just say this. I love the segment because Gene Wilder's performance, falling in love with the sheep, so deadpan, is so creepy and hilarious. When he's stroking the sheep, when he's talking about the sheep. My problem with this segment is that it's too goddamn long. It did not need to. It felt like it was 15, 20 minutes. This should have been 10 minutes. It was humorous for like 10 minutes, but then it went way past his due date, and I was like, no, this should have stopped. And I mean, the funniest part is when his wife says, "You smell like lamb." That was really funny. But but it just needs to be sped up. It was too slow. But Gene Wilder's performance is the selling point. A lot of people singled this particular segment out through this whole movie as the best part. And I think if you're talking about Gene Wilder's delivery as an actor, I think he does a convincing job showing you that he's in love with his sheep. And I think a lot of other actors would have played it very loopy and really crazy, but he just plays it so serious that it's very hilarious to me. But I'm not talking about, I'm not going to your level. I'm drawing the analogies and all that shit. I actually think if I try to compare this to real life, I honestly think if you're comparing it to a paedophile, and I don't know why we're going to do that, but just for argument's sake, I just think the public reaction would be on a whole nother level compared to someone, having relations with a sheep, which I think this segment accurately depicts. Now, putting that aside, how funny is this? It's funny-ish, but it goes on too long, like I said before. And this one segment definitely does not hold up this whole movie for the skits. So if I'm saying this is the best part, and even I have problems with it, then as we go forward, you're gonna see that, But that's all I'm gonna say. The segment. Gene Wilder, rest in peace. I think he did well here, but it's not great. It's just funny.
Well, Gene Wilder is always great. Yeah, he has wonderful natural charisma. And okay, I'm not trying to read too much into it. If I let that, it's already too late. Like I just felt uncomfortable watching it.
That's fine.
Let's move on.
That's
fine. I got nothing good to say.
That's fine. So segment number 3. Why do some women have trouble reaching an orgasm?
Oh well, this is your favorite one, right? This is the segment that's done all in Italian without subtitles. It's basically a spoof on Italian stereotypes. Woody Allen portrays an Italian macho, a man who has it all. He has the suit, the shades, the style, the look, the wife, even the red Ferrari, or at least a very nice red sports car. But guess what? He can't please his wife. Their sex life is basically dead, and she's falling asleep in bed with him. And you don't understand a single word of it, because I watched it with somebody who speaks Italian, and she said it doesn't make a whole lot of more sense if you understand the words either.
I didn't like this. The only thing I like is just so weird. Like they're having sex in public, and the way those scenes are shot are actually pretty good. And to be honest with you, this is as raunchy as you'll see Woody Allen in Retrospective. Like there's an actual scene where they're kind of almost getting naked. Ironically, the woman playing his wife was actually his real ex-wife, Louise Lasser, who was in like the last 2 movies, I believe, or last movie, Bananas. Yeah, Bananas.
Yeah, she was in Bananas as the love interest, and I think she had a small part in Take the Money and Run.
Exactly.
Well, she was one of the talking heads.
Yeah. The only thing I really like about this segment is just that Woody Allen is playing a machismo, and he does that kind of well. But this segment is not funny. He's doing it all in subtitles again. He came out of a particular idea, a particular agenda. And for me personally, for my taste, it fails. Didn't like it. It was long. It was longer than it needed to be. Like most of the segments in this movie, to be honest with you. And I was just like, meh. That's it. I just move on. I was like, skip. I just want to skip this one. That's how I felt.
You know, it could have been better if they would have bounced back and forth. You know, if we wouldn't have to watch the entire story of a segment unfold at once, but we would, reach a certain conclusion, then jump to the next segment, and then come back to check up on, okay, how did the characters develop?
A clever idea, and actually that is a very clever point. Some other sketch movies have done that in the future, so it would have helped this movie a lot. Funny enough, that's a good point.
Yeah, because one of the jokes is that you don't really understand the dialogue without subtitles, but you can clearly tell that after some point Woody Allen just keeps on saying random words that sound Italian, like cappuccino, Florenza, mia bella, Florenza, machabita. It's like, okay, I get it. That gave me a smile once, but it just goes on and on and on with every dialogue segment. And I can tell that he loves European film, and takes a lot of influences with the innovative camera angles and is more playful. And some of the stuff, like the costumes and the sets, are very stylish. But like you said, the whole joke is that to spice up their sex life, they have to have sex in public, and that results in a few sketches, and then that's it, the end. So not a whole lot of impact, not a whole lot of topical conversation, especially since the segment was called why do some women have trouble reaching orgasm, and that never gets answered except for the mild suggestion that maybe you should take it outside. I mean, outside the theater and leave the freaking movie.
Nah, well, let's not waste any time. Let's move on to the next segment, which is, to be honest with you, this one, to me, is the most tone deaf. And that is number 4, Are Transvestites Homosexuals? Now, this segment on its own could be completely outdated. It could be a victim of how outdated it is. But it's basically about an old man who goes to a dinner party, and you find out he has a thing for dressing up as a woman. Now
that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Now the title of this is what really confused. Transvestite, that's just a cross-dresser, not exactly a transvestite. And
don't get into gender identity, because we don't want to offend anybody. But from what I understand, that unless you're transsexual, then you just prefer to be identified. So up until you're transsexual, you just like the clothes, and when you're transsexual, that's when you get into the sexuality and the body change aspect of it.
Yeah,
it doesn't really matter, because the segment has next to nothing to do with it. The whole joke is the dude gets caught, so he goes into basically a mini chase around the block in women's clothing, and that's it. And this is the most tame segment, so I guess this is the one segment where you can say the shock, or nowadays the lack of shock value, has really hurt it. Because back in the day, it could have been outraged, like, oh no, because it was such a taboo topic. But today it's nothing. So yeah, I mean,
I'm really disappointed by the title, because it says are transvestites homosexuals, and if he encountered a man and they were flirting, it would have made more sense. But all he does is dress up as a woman. How does that got anything to mean homosexual? That makes no sense. So the title is completely misleading. It doesn't fulfill the promise, and I found it tone deaf. I'm like, I was just thinking at the time, do people obviously they did. Do people just assume that if they're just supposed to women, they're homosexuals, even if they just like women's clothing? So that's why I said I feel this one is tone deaf completely, because it doesn't fulfill its title at all. The guy just dressed up as a woman. That's it.
It's definitely no prequel to the Danish Girl. The only thing it made me realize that how damn boring the Amazon show Transparent is, because this is basically the same thing. If they took this segment and turned it into a TV show, that's what you would end up with. I mean, it's very straightforward. It's basically the same sketch of anybody doing anything at a dinner party where they end up, covered in something and they need to hide, and then they need to hide in the bushes, but then somebody finds them and there's a big commotion and the police show up. It's the same shtick. It's nothing new, and there's nothing bad about it. It's just
boring. Skip. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Man, this next segment, man. You know what? I might be most upset with this one in particular, because this should have been the most funniest. This is like the one I feel like should age the best. The segment's called "What Are Sex Perverts?" and it's basically, Woody Allen set up a parody of a television game at the time. It's called "What's My Line?" But in this segment, they called it "What's My Perversion?" And the host gets someone from the audience, whoever, to come on, and there's 3 people on the panel trying to guess what his perversion is. I mean, I thought this could be really funny, and it wasn't at all. It was not funny at all. I'm like, how could this not be funny? A game show. I don't care if this was 40, 50 years old. I was like, how did he drop the ball on this one? And at the very end, the last segment of him, his wife being there eating and him getting whipped, it wasn't funny at all. This was the most disappointing, because I'm like, this should have been funny, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't age well at all.
This was the most clever one, because this basically parodies, let's say, classic 60s game shows.
Yeah.
How they used to do it with a very uptight, gentleman-like host who's, the friends at home, please let me show you today's topic. And a panel of well-respected gentlemen and the hottest, most attractive females of the time, real divas, Hollywood glam, like very uptight, which is the perfect setup for Woody Allen to start goofing and throw in inappropriate things. I mean, this reminded me of stuff you can still find with him on YouTube on the game shows he went on as a guest star. Like,
that's true.
And those are more entertaining than this segment, by the way. I mean, he did one with Nancy Sinatra, where that was the password, where the people at home and the guests had to basically guess what the password was without saying the word ever. So this is a parody on that, where you had to guess what the contestant's perversion was without him giving any direct hints. He could just say yes or no, basically. But like you said, the jokes aren't really there. He even, parodies his own people in the rabbi joke at the end, and it's just odd to watch. Like, you look at each other like, is this still going on? Does this have a point? I guess we can mention at this point that this was his biggest budget, so he went all out, and I think things just got out of hand a bit and unfocused. There's apparently a lot of stuff that wasn't made and it was supposed to be shot, and a lot of stuff was cut out, and segments that didn't make it into the final version of the film. I mean, it's kind of sporadic.
Yeah.
You want to move on to the next one?
I do.
The next hidden gem.
Boy, hidden gem. I think this one's got the longest title. No, sketch number 6. Are the findings of doctors and clinics who do sexual research and experiments accurate? Man, this is another one that
should have been good. It should have been good. It starts off pretty good.
A very good setup, and to be honest with you, has a funny finish and a very ridiculous, elaborate finish. It's basically a spoof of like going to like a haunted house or a mad doctor scientist house, and
Universal monster movies and the classic horror genre. It's a classic haunted house setup.
I'm not gonna get too much into this. It's just it wasn't really that funny. This was another one that went on too long, and Woody Allen and this journalist go to this house. They meet this mad doctor. He's doing all these silly, weird experiments, and then I'll just skip. It's just boring. I'm not gonna get into any of that. At the end, the mad scientist had his greatest creation, which is Woody Allen's biggest prop in this whole movie, and is, to be honest with you, I will give Woody Allen credit. Again, another cinema first that to this day, I don't think anyone can say this has been done. Woody Allen, in this movie, especially at the end of this segment, creates a giant prop of a giant breast, or as he calls it in this movie, a giant tit, that is a giant monster tit that it is, I don't know what is it, 12 feet tall. It's real, it's squirting water or milk out of his breast, and it's hunting people down. And just seeing it from a filmmaker's perspective, I was just like, he actually did this, he actually wrote it. It's one of those ideas, he was write it on the paper and be like, nah, this is too ridiculous. But he actually committed, went through with it, and as I was watching it, I was laughing to myself thinking, Woody Allen, you're such a fucking pervert. Like you just had to do it. I mean, this isn't going to be actually funny. You just wanted to see it. It's like one of those things. It's really cool to. I'm not gonna lie. It was cool to see, especially when it's squirting the milk. I'm like, dude, this is so fucking perverted. Like you actually did this shit. So it put a smile on my face for that one fact, but it's totally silly. I mean, it's a good it's one of the movies' claim to fame. And again, I think it's a cinema first, a giant tit chasing people. But the whole sketch is crazy.
Well, it's a riff on the original Blob from like 58.
Yeah.
Where basically the monster of the movie is this, giant object that just constantly expanding, getting bigger, devouring everything in its path, that kind of stuff. I mean, this segment is really the victim of being part of this movie. Like, if you think about it, if this was done with more care for the setting, like really shooting it like with those classic angles from the German era, and having they tried with the set, but it wasn't enough to create that haunted house feel, that horror movie vibe. But if they went full on with it, if they shot an actual horror movie but inserted Woody Allen as the main hero instead of the charismatic doctor, that could have been funny. But the segment goes by too quick. It starts off good with the classic gas station, and visually you can tell it's going to be a spoof of a horror movie without even the horror elements coming in, which is good.
Yeah.
But then it just falls apart again. It's just
and
it has again another awkward joke about a bunch of kids gangbanging the female heroine.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are we here again? We had this thing with rape and played against Sam. Like, can we stop getting back to this topic? Like, really? Like, can we find another joke? And yeah, I think this is one of the segments that had actual potential, because it was a straight up spoof, and Woody Allen's sense of humor and screen presence, being a goofy hero, I think that could have worked in a horror setting where he has to fight off all these monsters, and he can't do the straightforward approach, so he would always get into some sort of accident to beat the Wolfman and Dracula. It's kind of like an Inspector Gadget almost, like this goofball finding off the horror legends, all these monsters, mythical creatures, but we never really get to that. It's just his inner fear of breasts magnified by the big screen.
Yeah. Whatever. So let's wrap this up by talking about the very last segment, lucky number 7. What happens during ejaculation? And when I think about the segment and I think about what you just said, I look at the movie on a whole and I say, you know what? He had some good ideas. And this last segment might arguably be the best one, because when I think about it in cinema, again, he's using a very clever idea and applying it to a sex comedy, which is Woody Allen has this NASA-like setup inside his own mind while he's having sex. You actually see the inner workings of his body, like a 100-man team. It's got the brain and the body and the penis, and they're all working together, and it's a whole team of people. And if you've watched that movie Inside Out, you got the reference.
Yeah, I was gonna make that. This shtick has been done a lot. Like it was a very, very clever idea. This is actually my favorite segment. I think this segment works the best. And like you said, just most recently, the Pixar animated movie took this idea of, an actual office being set up in your head to run your body like a company.
Yeah.
Almost. And it's done very well. This is the one with Burt Reynolds, who's probably my favorite performance in the movie because he really plays his part that's straight. You wouldn't be able to tell that he's talking about get ready for the penis penetration. We're ready for ejaculation. Somebody confirm. Are we ready for ejaculation? We need more pressure. Pull up the pressure pumps. He's just doing it so straight that you can't help but get enticed by it. And you really buy this setup of this working like a factory, and you have the different levels. You have the corporate guys on top.
Yeah.
Then you have the factory workers who try to produce the erection, and they keep getting tired. And this big hairy guy's like, "Come on, guys, do it, push." It's almost like a mine.
It was innovative. It was very innovative, and I wonder if Woody Allen was again. I feel like this was another first for him as a director to use this idea in cinema like this. I really feel like he was one of the first to do it.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, he plays himself. He plays a sperm, and they're like soldiers, getting dispatched to Vietnam. They're talking about like, I am not ready for this. I didn't sign up for this, man. Don't send me out. It's like, come on, pull yourself together. Like there was so much potential for them slapping each other. Like, be a man.
Yeah.
There's a couple of funny-ish lines, but...
Well, actually, it's funny you should say that, because my line in the movie is in this segment.
And wow, here we go.
Right at the end, you got it. This last segment, I was struggling to find a line in this whole movie, because I was bored, but there was one phrase, it's a bit dirty, but of course, this is a sex movie, so of course. So nearly, just like you said, they're talking about ejaculating, coming out, and then Woody Allen has this line that really made me laugh, and it says, "I don't want to go out there. What if he's masturbating and I end up on the wall?"
Yeah, I remember that.
It was the best line.
That wasn't bad.
It was the best line in the movie.
That wasn't bad, but to defend him, like a lot of these sketches are one-off ideas.
Yeah.
And just the novelty of making them, I guess, was enough at the time. And when I think about people trying to replicate this, there was that Eddie Murphy movie a couple of years ago that had the same concept where I think he was an alien and he was actually a robot body controlled by a group of people.
That's not Pluto.
No, not Pluto Nash. But I think
Norbit. No, that's not Orbit.
No. It came after Norbit. I think it was Meet Steve or something like that.
Horrible.
But same concept. It's the Men in Black concept of the body is just a big robot and there's tiny beings controlling it inside the head. We've seen this idea a bunch in different forms, and nobody could ever really do it justice. It's a great setup, but outside of a few cartoons and, like you said, probably in terms of the theatrical releases, the Pixar movie Inside Out, nobody else could do this right. Nobody could really make this into a funny, proper 90-minute to 2-hour comedy. So I appreciate this segment for what it was, but I know that this is not the last time Woody Allen makes an experimental movie, and he can do a lot better than this. So
he has another sex comedy coming up. I think it's a midnight summer sex comedy. We're not too far from it, to be honest with you. Let me wrap this up by saying a few things. Before we did this review, about 2 weeks ago, we had this conversation about sketch comedies in general. Sketch comedy movies in particular, they're not really good. Even to this day, 40, 50 years after this movie was made, there's a handful. And some of them, in the last 10 years, we've had 2 of the most terrible movies, sketch comedies that just show that we have not learned our lessons, that you can't do it. One of them was movie 43.
Oh, God.
Terrible sketch movies that was awful. And the one that even surpassed it in the same year was Inappropriate Comedy. Do you remember that movie?
No, I missed that one.
Oh, that was the one with who's the guy?
My apologies.
No, you didn't. Everyone saw this movie. It was the one with the guy who played the peon. What's his name? Adrian Brody? Is it Adam Brody? I think it is Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody. Yeah.
He played the.
If he was in it, he deserves it. He kissed Halle Berry. Good. Fuck that guy.
No, he played the gay version of Clint Eastwood.
Okay.
Yeah, in that movie. What's that gay where anyway, it's just a terrible movie. It's one of the most despised movie. But what I will say is, I would say, is there one one sketch comedy movie, and I'm not talking about themed ones. I'm not talking about like Scary Movie and Spaceballs, because those are themed. When you got a theme running through, it's easy.
Sure, that's a spoof. Spaceballs is a straight up spoof of Star Wars. We don't cut to a completely different story with completely different characters, after 10 minutes.
I found the one sketch comedy movie that is a classic, and to my utter surprise, it was made in the 70s as well. Can you remember what it was called?
Which one is it?
With one of the most awesome names of all time. It was the Kentucky Fried Movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that is a great sketch comedy movie. The sketches are amazing. And again, they're very few and far between. They're very rare. But I just don't think sketch comedy works in general. And it never really has. We haven't improved on it. If you don't have a thorough line...
Well, that was John Landis at his best. So that's a director in his peak. Yeah. I guess you could say.
Well, Woody Allen's a comedy. I think, anyway, I'm not even going to get into it. But anyway, the audience scores, let's get to the people. The audience scores in this movie. In the Woody Allen retrospective, this is one of the most frowned upon movies. It's in the mid to low 60s. People do not look on this very fondly. And again, just wrapping back to what you said in the beginning, if Woody Allen took this seriously, and if he used the titles to actually bring some introspective into these ideas, even at the time, I think he could have come up with a good movie. But all these titles, the skits he comes up with are so loosely based and are not funny and go on too long. It's just a wasted opportunity. It's just, honestly, this whole movie, and there's even speculation, this movie just seems like a spoof of the book, of the guy who wrote the book, and that's it. And the idea, and I got some good sketches I want to try. It just seems like an experiment that kind of failed. No, I just don't think it has a very good legacy, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. I think when you look at this movie, what you need to think about is that in 72, home video releases, like, they weren't big. Yeah, I mean, you didn't have the technology for it. So this movie was viewed as something you would watch in the theater, and then the theaters would maybe put it on every now and again. It's like one big joke, and from that perspective, it's like that oddball film, something that sticks out like a sore thumb. And Woody Allen is still growing as a filmmaker. You can see him, like I said, with the segments that were done later, clearly improving in terms of framing and just general direction with the lighting, the sets. You see him growing as a director, and that this guy is going to do stuff that's way better than this. This is him gaining the confidence from previous successes to say, I got a bunch of wacky sketches. Yeah, I want to piss this guy off with this movie title. I want to make an oddball movie that sticks out even more because I like pressing buttons. I like contrast. I like doing things that are different, that stick out in the theater. And yeah, this is what ended up coming out of all that. It's a one-off. Was quick to follow it up with a different film, and I can't wait to talk about that one instead.
Well, guys, there's not much more we can say. I do want to give a shout out to the Woody Allen Pages Watchers Guide, because there's a lot of interesting facts about this movie that we didn't even bother cover, and this podcast went on way too long. So again, guys, check out the Woody Allen Pages Watchers Guide, especially about this movie. There's a lot of things we didn't cover. If you're interested and you don't dislike this movie as much as we did, you're going to find a lot of things that you could feed off on that book. I'll put a link in the description. You can see it on the screen there. But there's not much more I can say. Simon, I was going to talk about feedback on a podcast, but this podcast has actually gone on for nearly 45 minutes, and I didn't actually want this one to be this long, so I'll let you decide.
Trust me, I didn't want to decide. We can tackle that in a separate video.
Yeah, let's do that next time.
What would be great, actually, if somebody really enjoys this movie, please, some way, shape, or form, express your opinion, because I would actually be really curious to hear it. This is the first time I show genuine interest. Usually I don't care. Trust me, I don't care at all about what you think or if you like the movie. I'm joking. But seriously, if this movie resonates with you, you think it's really funny, and some sketches or maybe all the sketches really work for you, tell us why. Because it's such a weird failed experiment that it would almost make the movie better to know that there are people out there that we're dying to see this, that this is the movie they've been searching for their entire life.
No, you really are just you really are just
trolling them a little bit.
You are, because I checked the diehards. I've been on all the Woody Allen fan sites, the Reddit page. Shout out to the Reddit, Woody Allen Reddit. Shout out to you guys. Don't shout you guys out. I checked, man. These guys, everyone frowns upon this movie, and it's easy to because there isn't a thorough story narrative. It's just sketches. So, and with sketches, the whole nature of a sketch is you can't please everyone. Some are gonna hit, some are gonna not. So you're never gonna. It's like watching an episode of Saturday Night Live. Some sketches gonna love, some you're not. So some are gonna have great season. But anyway, let's not go round and round in circles. If Dark Simon says, if you really did like this, let us know in the comments below. We do not have to agree, and I'd like to hear you guys' perspective, regardless of what we think. Share your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Whether you're on the podcast, thank you for listening. Whether you're on YouTube, thanks for all the support. I will say this: majority of feedback has been positive. But we'll speak more about it in another podcast because I do want to address some of the haters or the criticizers because we like to give feedback. But let's wrap this up, Simon. I want to thank you, my buddy, Simon at Simeon_Rad on Twitter. Thank you for joining me on this one.
That's fine. You're welcome. And also, what's black and white on none falling down the staircase?
Well, that joke was just as funny as the sketches in this movie. So that was perfect.
Yeah, exactly. On that note, goodbye.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.